You're listening to Wolf Spirit with Dave Corso.
Good morning, world. This is Dave from the Wolf's Den studio at Wolf Spirit Radio, saying it's Tuesday morning, therefore it must be time for the one, the only, Jennifer Hillman and her show, Abstract Illusion Radio, with her guest, first hour guest, that is, Kate Bartolotta.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. This is Jennifer Hillman, and as he said, I have the beautiful Kate Fields Bartolotta on. I found her through a wonderful internet it's journalism. It's called the Elephant Journal, and she is an amazing writer. She's very insightful. She is a massage therapist. She does consulting on a lot of different things, and I actually just had this thought in my head, and I thought she'd be perfect to be on this subject, which is reclaiming the feminine energy, which is so prevalent right now. So a lot of women are in the work field, and yet she is very much it's tough to always be holding on to your feminine energy. I'm being distracted. I apologize.
That's okay.
So with that, hello, Kate, by the way. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jennifer.
I kind of dove into the subject without really letting you in.
That's okay.
It's really a kind of a testing and a trying and a triumphant time for women right now, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think right now, more than any time, we have the most options available to us, at least in the workforce. But, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about how, we see writers like Sheryl Sandberg and some people really encouraging really extreme measures in terms of women in the workforce and really what seems to many to be a letting go of the feminine energy in order to be successful. And I think that really does women a disservice and does society a disservice to come at it that way.
But I agree, but at times don't you think that's the only way they're going to get their foot in the door? Or at least that's their thinking?
I think that's the way that it's been. And I think, what we see in a lot of the non-work sector, what we see in relationships and in that discussion, there seems to be a real draw towards receptivity and vulnerability. And I think, I think over the next decade we'll really see that shift of, instead of men and women adding that aggressive and adding more yang energy into the workforce, that we're going to start to see that shift within the workforce as well. That, to be able to bring a vulnerability and bring a receptive, creative side to the workforce, especially as we see, like you were saying, I know you're kind of struggling saying, well, Elephant Journal is this or that. We see so many creative endeavors and so many people in really non-traditional careers that to come at it from a different way rather than the old school, get your foot in the door and work your way up to the top. People are really creating a whole new world for themselves in terms of business.
It was interesting, and I'm looking at my Facebook, because I asked people what their thoughts were about what is the role in women in the changing society. And I got a lot of people that were really just saying it's time to go backwards in a way and go more to the monarch kind of thing, where the women were in charge and really trying to take control because women have a better way of doing things. And yet there is some people that were more interested in just finding a balance in both sides, the men and women just being equals. And I think in the end, we're going to have one extreme to the other, but I think we're heading more towards the middle. I think there's more people would like the equal than anything else, because both sexes have strengths and weaknesses, and together we can balance it all out.
Absolutely. And I think, there are there's such a continuum, and, you know, there are women who naturally, just their personality is more aggressive than a stereotypical feminine, receptive personality. And there are definitely men who are more sensitive and vulnerable, just their natural constitution. So I think, you know, as we get to a point of valuing both things and not seeing, you know, like you said, you mentioned someone saying, oh, you know, women do things better. And I think that's a real disservice too. You know, there is a lot of that within the feminist community sometimes saying, well, you know, the way men do it needs to go. And that's not necessary either. I think, you know, valuing what both genders add and what both polarities add in work and in relationships.
So with everything that is now available for women and men, the energy that we were discussing earlier is the fact that vulnerability is now being presented and saying, and almost like giving us permission to have that vulnerability.
Yes, definitely. And not seeing it as a weakness. You know, I think that's often portrayed as vulnerability has often been portrayed as a weakness, you know, rather than seeing it as, this is my choice to become vulnerable in this situation, whether it's through, you know, in a work situation, it might be something like taking a creative approach to something that makes you vulnerable. You know, if you're not doing things the standard way, taking a creative approach to either problem solving or towards your career as a whole is vulnerable. And, you know, a lot of times that's been seen as a weakness. And I think, you know, you see things like Brene Brown's talk on vulnerability, which has been hugely popular, the TED Talk, and similar books on the subject where, you know, people start talking about vulnerability and there's just this outpouring of, yes, people want this and, you know, they want to be able to do that or receive that. And I think just the natural extension of that is seeing that become more acceptable and more championed within the work sphere as well.
And she is doing a huge amount of, it's interesting, her being someone who has studied it and had the studies and gave the presentation of the facts, how much people do crave to be able to be that vulnerable and that open, because you're more authentic the more open you are, the more honest you are. And ripping off those masks. And it's like, it's very scary for a lot of people because it's been so set for so long. You wear this mask in this situation and this mask in this situation, and neither the two mix.
Yes, definitely.
And
I think, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying now is the time that with the energy the way it is, it's time to rip off all the masks, throw them down, and just see where you are.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, to me, that's when I was saying earlier about really women trying to stay in sort of the old way of doing things as being a disservice, because, you know, when you think of, and I mean, like I said, there's a continuum, but generally feminine roles versus masculine roles, it's more acceptable for women to take that vulnerable step. So if we're going to see that really change, you know, it's actually a step backwards for women to try and not, you know, to try and conform to the already existing system. When, you know, you have so many women business leaders, if they're taking those authentic steps and you know, really being vulnerable in a workplace setting in terms of taking, you know, creative approaches to things and being truly authentic, it will really empower men to do that as well.
It's like Marianne Williamson said, once you take that leap and allow yourself to do it, it really does give other people permission to do the same.
Definitely.
So what are some of the tips that you would suggest for people to take off the mask? I mean, it's to go ahead and really open up themselves. Do you have any steps that you like to suggest? I
think, you know, getting away from our scripts of how we're supposed to behave in certain situations, whether it's work or relationships. You know, I think a lot of people, it's to constantly check in with yourself and be mindful. Am I being authentic? You know, it sounds obvious, but I think it's so easy for us to, this is how I talk when I'm at work, or this is how I behave with this person, and to really just check in with ourselves and not get caught up in old patterns like that, because that's, just another step away from authenticity.
But do you think people have trouble actually knowing when they're truly being authentic because of all the masks and all the layers they've put on?
This might sound odd, but I think one of the biggest things that people can do to really tap into whether they're being authentic is to have some kind of a physical practice, whether it's yoga or whether they're receiving body work on a regular basis, or whether their meditation practice has a physical component to it. Because if we aren't doing something that really is embodied and feeling, knowing what's going on in our body when we do our daily lives, we're very much in our heads and online and busy with things. So if we don't have some kind of a physical practice going, it's harder to recognize when we have a mismatch between what we're saying or doing. You have that gut feeling when something isn't a match, but when we're very much in our heads, it's harder to recognize that right away. So that would be my advice. I know that, if you're so much in your thoughts and in, your head about things, it's harder to notice that physical feeling when your words aren't authentic for you.
Exactly. If you're not paying for that little twang in your stomach, or
yes,
that suddenly feeling nauseous when you're saying yes when you really want to say no, it does make a difference.
Yeah, it does. And I think, anything that we can do to really be in our bodies will help with that. So
with your practice as a massage therapist, you're very much in touch. Do you ever touch somebody and just feel their energy is just like so tense or so much?
Oh, absolutely.
That you just want to just cleanse yourself afterwards?
That needs to be a part for anyone who's doing any kind of work on the body. And I know, you look at surgeons and things like that have an actual physical cleansing practice, but the therapists I know really do, whether it's something energetic in addition to, the physical washing off type thing, that you just have to have that kind of a practice to not take on the stress that's, with the people you're working on. Most people that are in some kind of a healing profession want to help people feel better. So in order not to take all that energy on ourselves, there needs to be some kind of grounding afterwards.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
I do Reiki.
Include your boundaries. Yes, yeah.
So I usually do kind of a clearing before, shield, and then do another cleanse afterwards. Just because, I even give the intention any energy that is hers or theirs will not be mine. And I just do that separation before. With the opening and vulnerability, do you feel that there is a lot of people that will take advantage of that now?
Do you mean that people will take advantage in a negative way, or that people will start to do that?
Both.
I think that is the ultimate risk of vulnerability, is that, that's kind of the point. But I think when people take that step on a personal level or on a business level, the more people that are living authentically, it does have a ripple effect. I think, obviously there's always going to be polarities. There are always going to be people who just are, in a really negative place in their life and in a destructive way, either personally or in business. But I think when we talk about vulnerability, we talk about this receptiveness as being feminine, it is something that's inviting. And I don't think it exclusively is inviting a negative reaction or, for someone to take advantage. I think it invites openness from others.
The other thought that popped in my head is, because of the shift of energy right now, do you think that men are getting more confused about what their role is in society. The reason why I asked this is I have actually two brother-in-laws that stayed at home while my sisters made the money.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as the sisters wanted to stay at home, the guys got so comfortable they refused to go to work.
Well, it's a controversial stance, but I really feel like in many ways there are far more choices for women right now than there are for men. We have that option often to stay home or to go or to do things like that. And talking about, middle America, mid-range income, obviously, at either extreme, there's all kinds of other issues. But in many ways, it is more difficult, as women are, like we talked about earlier with a lean-in kind of attitude. There are women that are really embracing that yang energy and taking what's been traditionally a masculine role or a masculine approach. And then for men to take a more receptive role is still not really championed by our society at all. I think, a lot of what we're talking about doesn't have to be exclusive to any particular biological gender, but I do think we're still a long way from it being as acceptable for men to be what's traditionally feminine and vulnerable than it is for women to be aggressive or assertive. So yes, I do think it's challenging for men.
Do you think people understand what exactly the definition of femininity is? Because I don't think they're really educating kids these days exactly what that is.
I don't, and I think it's really something that's evolving. That was something I'd written about a little bit earlier this year. Just that, we have all these ideas about what men are, what women are, and you see different trends that have gone. We're now people refer to like third wave feminism, which is less of the old school, I want to be just like a man attitude, and more of I am a woman, and that's equally acceptable and valuable to what men bring to relationships and to the workforce. But I think, especially when you look at the media and media caricatures of both genders most of the time, you watch any reality TV show and most of the women are kind of a polished up caricature of some idea of femininity, and the same for the men. They're like, jock, meathead type, archetypal male. Yeah, exactly. Well, even if they're not jerks, but it's like, well, the women are all, polished and helpless, and the men are all like, these meaty, like, thoughtless, whatever. And I think the more that we can, in some of our independent media, move away from that and realize that, there's so much of a huge range in between those two things, and that they are caricatures, and that we don't need to try to fit into either of those scripts.
Yeah, well, it's been interesting because since I've been in the workforce, I've had a lot of negative experiences. We're calling in Dr. Sam Muggzi, by the way, to join the conversation.
Okay.
That it's been really, it's like I decided kind of early on, I'm going to be self-employed.
Yeah. Because
I got such a negative, I went through the whole sexual harassment joke early on in my career. So it's just like, no, I'm done. I'm done playing this game.
May I break in for a moment, ladies?
Of course you can.
Hello, Dr. Samula Muggzi. She's here with you two fine ladies, and the three of you have at it.
Good morning.
Hey, Muggs.
Good morning.
Muggs, this is Kate. She is a beautiful writer and a massage therapist and a wonderful woman that I've invited on to speak about reclaiming femininity and the woman's role in the society that's changing very quickly. What's your thoughts on the subject?
Oh, man, this is my favorite topic. Seriously, what I have been shown in like video camera images is that men need us. right now to balance out their energies, but also to set the planet back onto a balanced frequency. There seems to be where women have the nurturing ability, and we need to go into a phase where we're nurturing not only ourselves, our family, but also the planet. And it's women's role that is going to do that. I mean, if you think about our lives and how many people that we touch, not just through work, but our daily lives, we're in the prime position to start nurturing our planet, start nurturing our lives, and making things happen. One of the problems that I see doing all my readings is that most women want to be docile. They want to be the victims. They want to ride in the back seat and let somebody else steer their life car for them. And you know me, Jen, I don't believe in that at all. I think that women need to start driving their own cars, you know?
Well, I think we're all very strong women on here that Kate is a go-getter. Her writing is phenomenal. She writes on many subjects, but she's always out there with a great perspective on what's going on with things. I mean, the feminine energy is very much needed in the vulnerability. But with my own experiences, it's finding that balance of when to really be open and very vulnerable so I'm not open for attack. Because I have been very open, and yet I know I walk myself into it, but at the same time it's being responsible for my own energy and how much I'm giving as well as receiving. Do you guys feel that you're fighting yourself and finding that balance at times?
Well, I think in what you're saying, there's a difference between being vulnerable and having that open, vulnerable energy in a proactive way and being in a victim mentality. Because that can be, like Jen was saying, or like
Muggzi.
You were saying, that Muggzi was saying, there are people that are really in that passive state of just wanting someone to take over for them, which often leads to being taken advantage of. And I think there's a distinct difference there between being actively authentic and vulnerable with our choices and being sort of stepping into a passive place of being a victim, or being, whether it's, a truly negative thing like you mentioned about a sexual harassment type thing, or it's just allowing others to really run the show. That, I don't think that they're necessarily the same. Does that make sense?
The thing I was saying, what popped in the word is, the word that popped in my head was being naive.
Yes, definitely. And
it's not,
true vulnerability is not what we're saying in terms of, being naive and letting somebody else take over.
Or allowing somebody to use your openness to their advantage. And it's really being able to discern the energy that is available and that you're putting out. And that's been a lesson that I've gone through. It's like, it's not necessarily the presentation, it's not necessarily that what you're putting out the message, it's the presentation of the message and how they perceive it. So, Muggzi, do you have anything to say about my comment, or?
Yeah, of course I do. You know me. I don't put myself in a vulnerable situation. I just don't. I mean, that's the old paradigm, and this is where we got to shift our thinking. If you're putting yourself in a position, you need to be empowered. And the only way to do that is through knowledge. First of all, you have to have your boundaries up, and you have to be able to defend yourself and protect yourself. That's one of the biggest lessons that us angels are learning how to do, is defending ourselves. We don't have to be a doormat to anybody, and we don't have to fight. We just leave. You don't have to participate in that drama. So there is no more of this, I got to be vulnerable, because really you don't. You want to make sure that you're protected, you're knowledgeable, and you know what's going on. And Jen, I've known you for years. You're a love bug. I mean, wherever you go, you spread the love vibration, and you're always there for other people. You're always wanting to help other people, and they suck you dry, especially men. But that's why we got to get our sword. You can only use your sword and defend yourself if you know your boundaries. If you don't have good boundaries and you don't know what you're willing to accept and not accept, then that becomes a problem. And then there becomes that point where, okay, now I have to say no. There's a red flag. I have to say no. And most women, they won't assert their protection. And that's when we get in trouble. So there is no more of this, oh, I got to be vulnerable crap, because we're not vulnerable. If we go through and we do something and we've researched it, we're protected, a bad situation arises, which we're going to do as we start to pull back from that negative universe we were living in. So there is going to be some confrontation. We need to accept that it's going to be there until we get the tide moving into a more Christ consciousness movement. So you know that there's going to be some kind of hesitation, or there's going to be some challenges. All right, how are you going to handle it? What are you going to do? One of the things that my boys taught me was that we have to learn how to protect ourselves in a respectful, loving way. Most angels protect themselves. That's why they have army angels. So for us to come down here thinking that we're going to be a doormat and help anybody, we're really not, because we're allowing them to perpetuate being a victim, and we're allowing ourselves to be taken down.
Okay,
so,
I want to
go.
Okay, the way we're saying vulnerability is not the doormat. We're using it as being more authentic.
And being authentic.
That's the way we're using vulnerability. Not that we're victim, that we're more open and receptive to who we truly are.
And a great example, I think, in the difference between, what you're talking about in terms of protecting yourself is, when you look at the idea of vulnerability, not as a, here I am, do whatever you want, but a, here is who I am. That's actually a very strong versus a victim mentality that's, like you said, a doormat, to kind of just sort of either be used or be pushed around. What women can naturally bring to both relationships and in the workforce is that strong vulnerability. In the same way you think of people being compassionate, and compassionate isn't always being nice. Sometimes being compassionate is telling someone, it is being quite critical and saying, this is where you're, compassionately telling someone, this is where you're wrong, this isn't working. To have that true strength of vulnerability and standing in an authentic place, whether it's relationships or just, in a more global sense, I think offers us a chance to really be strong, but still be very much in our feminine energy.
But I don't understand why being authentic would make you vulnerable. Vulnerable is a victimization word.
No, it's totally the opposite of what you're saying.
It should be allowable, and it should be accepted that we can be ourselves, that we present ourselves forward and allow people to see who we are without feeling like we're vulnerable. That's my point. We shouldn't feel vulnerable. I don't. I present myself as who I am, and I don't feel vulnerable because this is who I am. But I know that if somebody, because I'm a love bug too, if somebody wants to take advantage of that, then my swords go up. But I never feel like being myself is being vulnerable.
I gotcha. I think we're using the term in a different way. It sounds like for you that the idea of vulnerability has a lot of baggage associated with it.
I'd agree with that.
Because what I'm looking at, and one of the things I've been exploring in terms of vulnerability as a strength is that idea that, you know, what Jen and I were talking about it earlier in terms of in a work setting, that if instead of feeling like we have to have our swords up, have to do things, you know, the old school way, to break out of old patterns of behaving, which might be a vulnerable feeling because you're not doing the expected thing, it actually can be a great strength, either in relationships or in work or in our creative fields. But it sounds like for you that the idea of that vulnerable is just feels like a bad thing for you.
It's just not in my vocabulary because I present, okay, let me give you a scenario. My workplace is the Internet. I work on the Internet, and Jen and I have been doing this for eons now, it seems like. And we have to, on a daily basis, put ourselves out there and do predictions that might or might not come true. We might get to that person and we might not. We have dealt with through the years where other psychics are jealous of us, and so they intentionally call us and talk for 2 minutes, and then they bash us. So we are always on that attack. So there becomes a point where you're no longer vulnerable to it. When you do a radio show, I mean, people, disinfo agents or people that just don't connect with me are going to say, oh, I don't like her, I don't like her voice. And we get used to that. So, and it's their opinion. I'm not subjected to their opinion. They don't know me. They don't hang out with me. They just see what they want to see, and usually it's a reflection of themselves. So you become very callous to other people's opinions or their attacks even, because I know who I am. So vulnerability, you know, that's where I'm coming from.
I think how would it feel if instead of when you are attacked in that way, instead of immediately putting your guard up, if you were to take a totally different tack with them and say to them, how you're treating me now is unacceptable, or I'm uncomfortable with the way you're speaking to me, because that really is that vulnerable place of being honest, rather than taking the, you know, I'm just going to block this person out. You can retain that vulnerability, keep that openness so that you're not blocking off in other areas of your life, but you're still protecting yourself from further damage.
Well, in my industry, and it's unique, but in my industry, we can't rebuttal anybody that bashes for number one.
Unless they're still on the phone. Unless they're still on the phone, they're gone.
Right.
We have no way of getting back in touch with them. So it is
kind of a unique situation versus what we were talking about sort of more globally.
So it is a very interesting situation, and you learn really quick what other people think. I don't have to take on.
Exactly.
And
that's
you know, and that's the best we really can do, and that's the swords. It's being open to the point that we can give people the information that they're looking for or not necessarily wanting to hear, and understanding how and what they get from it, the perspective or the understanding of what they get is really up to them, and it's no reflection on us and what we said. But it does make us kind of understand and discern. I can tell right away when somebody comes on if they got good intentions or not. I've actually had women argue with what I'm saying. I'm saying, excuse me, why did you even call me if you don't want to hear what I said? And they literally
so it sounds like really a unique.
It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting learning ground for discernment. That is for sure. But it can be a lot of fun, and I've met some wonderful people through it and have some wonderful clients who I've seen grown through the years and in their vulnerability had their strength come through it, through the conversations. And I know Sam has done the same. And it's really a great way of helping others understand themselves and through other people, I think, at least for me, through my clients, I've learned more about myself in the process. And it's been a wonderful way of me growing. And I do think I'm much stronger than when Sam first saw me. I'm more on the face of people and letting them know this isn't acceptable. In my relationships and in situations, there is a lot of different ways that people can take on the feminine energy, and through their experiences, they're going to follow the path that's right for them. And the wording and the way it's, like I said before, is not necessarily the wording, but it's the way that people perceive what the word is. And in many ways, there's different ways of taking on the word vulnerability or even feminism. You know, and being that feminine women overall, the definition most people is receptive, nurturing, strong. I think that's one thing that universally people will say that is a feminine energy. You think of the mother, you think of the goddesses, which I see a lot more people studying what the goddesses are like and trying to get more of that energy within them.
Oh, definitely. I think that's been a huge surge in popularity over the last few years.
Have you found that, Sam?
Yeah, it's funny because in our careers, Jen, what we've experienced is that we usually, when there is an energetic change in the timeline and a consciousness thinking change, we get hit with it first, and we get to experience it first. Because people are calling us. I don't know why that happens. I've just been watching this for 14 years now, and it's always happened. But I want to go back to something else that you said, Kate. You said, you know, talking to that person and saying, you know, what's wrong or what have you. And I understand that dialogue. But when you have somebody, like we do radio shows, and so, and I do YouTube videos and such, and people are always wanting to criticize and put you down. If I spent all my time going around trying to fix those situations with people,
absolutely,
I would get nothing done in my daily life. So I have come to the conclusion that if people really want to get to know me, there's enough of me out there. Be open, what have you. But if somebody's closed and they're on the attack, then they're going to attack. And then it's usually later they'll go, oh, she was right. Oh, I see now. You know, but I have to, in order to keep pushing forward and moving in the direction that I want to go, I cannot be stopped by every little naysayer and try to clarify with them what I said or why I did it. I'll do it in small dosage, but when it becomes an energy drain, that's when I cut them loose and just figure you need another teacher and you'll find them along your path.
That definitely makes sense. And I think, you know, one of the things Jennifer and I were talking about earlier was more in a global sense, both in relationships and in the business world, that there are some shifts starting, both regardless of gender, towards embracing those feminine energies.
See, again, what your shift is and what you're experiencing, we've already been experiencing this for 2 or 3 years. It's already started, and we've already had to digest it and analyze it and regurgitate how we want to approach these issues, where a lot of the mainstream people are just now starting to face some of these issues that we've already been involved in.
Definitely. I think, you know, when you look at any of the sociological research that's going out and different books on the topic, it's something you see in fields like yours and in any kind of spirituality fields. You see those things because you're in a more sensitive place. You're seeing those changes sooner than maybe, you know, a corporate setting.
Corporate setting
are generally more reined in and closed up to noticing that type of thing.
I think the corporate scene is the slowest progress of anywhere because of the long-term mentality of the situation and plus the level of greed that is there, whereas I think the profit part of it does play a role of how fast people are opening up to it. I just know so many women that have been passed over because of a man who has no experience, and yet because of the sex and the gender, they will hire somebody else who happens to be male just because he's a man, and they can't prove it, but it's obvious. So, and it's slowly changing where, it's just a very interesting dynamic, that is happening. It's like my sister works in property management, and her boss is a woman, and above her is a man. And this woman, it really will just cow down to whatever the man says, wants to be under the radar, does not want to stand up. And my sister stands up for herself. I mean, she's as strong. If she sees something wrong, she speaks her mind. And her boss absolutely is very critical for standing in her power, because this woman has not been able to do it ever. She hasn't allowed herself to. But because she's played the quote-unquote man's game, and the yes, ma'am, yes, sir, whatever you say, sir, she feels she's gotten ahead of the game. And yet my sister has gotten ahead in the game. In fact, she was president of her own company at one time, didn't want the pressure of it, yet she has more now. Anyway, so she knows how to handle it. So it's very different how two women standing right next to each other can be so very different.
Definitely. I think that raises a good point, too, of, you know, the whole yes, sir, yes, ma'am, for either gender of, you know, is it worthwhile to get ahead by not rocking the boat? Because that goes back to what we were talking about with authenticity. You know, if you're kind of I'll just go along with what's going on because this is how it's done, rather than being authentic, is that really, you might be getting a raise or sticking around in your job longer, but is that really to your benefit, to anyone's benefit?
Well,
it's definitely something you might see women naturally do more than men, like you said. But that's an interesting, you know, going back to talking about authenticity as well.
So it's the role in women now really is really trying to be that square peg in a circle, and trying to fit in sometimes when it doesn't quite fit completely, but being okay with it, and knowing that pretty soon they will be going down to your size in a way, but we have to think outside the box to make it happen. So I agree with Muggzi. You got to have a lot of knowledge of what's going on to really understand what's really going on in the whole thing. The other thing that I've noticed with women and men is their intuition is really opening up to really make them aware of what's going on, and really pushing them in the direction of finding that balance that we all are needing to find within ourselves, to find it outside, and being that example of, I'm okay with myself. Whatever I've done, I'm okay. I've learned from it, and just moving on, not letting the past experience hold you back, but understand and learn from it. And at least for me, lessons come back around, and I get it in a different perspective. And I've gotten to the point that I know it's a different perspective of the same lesson. So I know how to maneuver or learn from the situation, so I get through it faster to find that balance again. Do you find that?
Definitely. I agree.
Go on.
I was going to say that, you know, when you're talking about the intuition and learning from these things, and that seems to be growing, that kind of ties in with what we were talking about, you know, feminine energies coming about, because intuition versus, you know, quantifiable knowledge is definitely something that has often been seen as a more feminine characteristic. So the acceptability of going with our gut and listening to intuition is another way that's becoming, I hate to say more mainstream, but really it is. You know, if you even looking at just different business journals and things, you start to see people talking about the importance of going with our gut, following our intuition. So that's another great example of that shift towards the feminine energy.
Now, Muggzi, in your readings, are you finding more men calling you these days?
Constantly, yeah. Sometimes that's all I get. And I'm so proud of them because they've really had to let their ego go to be able to soul search and find out what they want instead of following the paradigm regulations. But I wanted to add something else. You struck a chord with me when you were talking about being authentic. And one of the things that I've learned with health is that when you're authentic, you resonate a frequency, a tune that keeps your body in perfect alignment in having pristine health because you're vibrating at your frequency because you're being authentic. Anytime that you're in a position where you're not being authentic, you then send a different frequency through your body. And by doing that is how the body starts to break down, and dis-ease can start to settle into that body. If you are not being authentic, and let's say that you're lying and you're doing whatever, we tend to swallow that dis-ease in certain areas of our body, and that will start to shut down as the energy is depleted from that organ because you're not in your authentic state. And I have seen people that when we've done readings and we put them back on track and we get them back into touch with their authentic self and showing them that there's nothing wrong with their authentic self. It's just what society has labeled them. But once they step into their own empowerment and become more authentic, that dis-ease will be gone by the end of the week. I've seen this many, 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 many times.
Absolutely. I think, any time that, we're not doing what's authentic for us, whether it's, even something as simple as just speech and not, and saying yes to things when we really want to say no, it definitely, it's physically uncomfortable. And when it continues or when it's a whole life pattern, I do think you see lots of disease going on with that.
I mean, even if you have a really great diet and you feel like you're on your track, but you're lying to yourself, or you're letting other people influence what you want to do or say, and you're going against what your gut's feeling is, you'll still get those diseases. And until you make the empowerment of saying, no, I don't agree with you on that subject, and really holding your own opinion and not letting people sway you, the possibility of that dis-ease is going to be in there because your body knows when you're lying, and it's just like you feel it immediately. At least I do. It's like, I really don't lie anymore, and it's got me, a lot of people angry at me because I do stand up and say what I mean, and I'm very blunt. Being Sag, yay Sag. We really have a very blunt, direct way of saying people, and this is the way we see it, this is the way we are, and either you love it or you hate it, but you definitely know where we stand. So,
do you find that's an impact for your health as well?
It can be. There's been a lot of things that have come up. And I do want to, real quick, I want to say thanks to Dr. Sam Muggzi. She had to run off, so I thank her for popping on the show. But with everything that I've been through in my life, it's just, I've played catch up a lot. So I find that it's, the more I'm within my power and the more I just say, it is what it is, and just accepting people as they are, and just letting go of the obligations that people might place against me, against me as well as for me. I find myself happier and my vibration going up. Do you find that you have ever, you just seem like you're very together. I mean, did it take, well, okay, you fake it really well.
I'm just laughing because, I'm in the middle of trying to move and other things going on. And, I think having it together is a practice. And it's not, hey, I have everything together and I'm all set forever. It's a daily practice. It's in my daily yoga practice. It's my meditation practice. It's, trying to make healthy choices with my food and with my relationships. And it's, I keep at it.
Okay. So how long have you been doing yoga?
How or how long?
How long?
How long? My first yoga class, I always joke about it this way. My first yoga class was 17 years ago, but I have not been practicing for 17 years. I've had a regular yoga practice consistent yoga practice for about the last 5 years. And now I practice at a studio usually 3 or 4 days a week and 2 days a week at home.
So you're very dedicated to your practice.
I'm dedicated to my practice because it's just people talk about, healthcare costs, and people complain about the expense of yoga or the expense of organic food. And to me, I would rather spend the time and money on yoga or on massage and on organic food than be spending a lot of time at the doctor or money on medication.
Yes, I do my best not to do medication myself. And I'm like you. I took a yoga class. God, it was back in the 80s, actually. And slowly it's interesting because I took my first yoga class and I realized I've been doing yoga positions all my life and I didn't even realize
it. Oh, sure. Yeah. If you've ever been a runner or anything like that, you probably did, Yeah.
I mean, I used to just do stretches and then I'd go to class and go, God, I did this when I was like 5 years old. And I really think we came through the eons of lives that we've had that we just naturally did what made us more centered and more connected to Mother Earth as well as above. So it's the divine. So it's been really interesting. I always do some kind of yoga positions. I won't say I do a long, solid 30 minutes, but throughout the day, I definitely do meditation and do something for myself in some form just to keep active. Because if I don't, my energy is gone. My focus is gone. So it's really interesting to see, the difference. And the other thing that I find very positive for me is music.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
It really
it influence either way. Yeah.
It definitely
energize you or calm you down.
Yeah, it definitely centers me. It definitely feeds my soul. Let's put it that way. So that's something that to me is a practice, is making sure I listen to some good music.
Yeah.
So it's been very interesting. So overall, the feminine energy,
and all these practices that we're talking about too. I mean, all of them do have a yin and yang component to them, but a lot of these things, to have a physical yoga practice, to meditate, to do all these things, have often been sort of the realm of women and at least in the West. And so I think, as they become more mainstream, both for men and women, that is a great tie-in and wrap-up in general, of just feminine energy expanding.
Exactly. And we're coming to actually the end of the hour. Yay.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jennifer. This has been great.
And people can read your articles on Elephant Journal and connect with you on Facebook. You really have some great information, and you're funny, and to me, you're very together. Your energy is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think you're very, very grounded and really a role model of really just putting it out, the creative energy. But one quick question. How long have you been writing?
I have been writing my whole life. I've been writing more focused in terms of on wellness the past 3 or 4 years, and I've been writing for Elephant Journal for the past 2 years.
Excellent.
I used to do a lot more. I've done some fiction and poetry over the years in small journals and that sort of thing, in small magazines. And I have hopefully I'm looking around to have my book out in October.
Oh, wonderful.
on touch as the missing component for lasting wellness.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
Yeah, it is huge. That's why you got to talk about it. It's a big deal. We're pretty touch-free in our society.
Oh, and especially with the internet. Oh, you're definitely going to be back on for that one. Oh my God.
Okay.
But we got to make room for 2 hours for that one because that's a huge subject. Because it is, even with the internet, it's like meeting people. I like to meet them face to face, and it freaks people out.
Yes.
You go meet them and go, really? You're going out of the way because of me? You want to meet me face to face? What? And it's like, yeah. And it's like, wow, I can't believe you actually drove an hour to see me. Why not? So it really is awesome to have you on. I hope people will check you out. We're going to take...
Thanks.
Yay. This is Jennifer Hillman, and this is Air Abstract Illusions Radio. We'll be back for another hour in just a few minutes. We're going to take a few break, and please understand that this is a listener-supported operation. So if you can donate, we greatly appreciate it. So we can have great conversations like this on, and we will be back in a few minutes. Thanks again for listening.